Hello, Where We Are listeners. If you're a longtime fan of this podcast or you're just joining us for the first time today, we want to tell you more about our podcast platform called Spotify for Podcasters. We've been using this platform for over a year, and it's been easy to use, and new features are added all the time. You can record and edit podcasts from your phone or computer. You don't need anything fancy, and you don't need previous podcast experience. When you hit publish, you will distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify if that's your kind of thing. And with Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. But here's the thing, you can earn money, but it's a free platform. There's no catch. If you're curious or want to see what it's all about, download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
On this week's episode of Where We Are, is the Trump era over? Melissa and I will discuss that and much more. You're listening to Where We Are.
It's the end of the weekend.
This is Where We Are. We are the Wheres. I'm Michael.
I'm Melissa.
And that little jingle
jangle
was not one of the reindeer. It was not Santa's sleigh. It was our cat who thinks he's a dog, Clive, almost ruining my intro.
We are constantly having to edit this podcast so that you don't hear him jingle jangling all over the house because he loves me especially, and so when we shoot this on like a Saturday night or on a Friday night, he loves to just be near me or on me, and he's very distracting. Clivey boy.
But so, yeah, I can only catch so much in the edits, so if you hear some jingle bells, it's Clive. Well, Melissa, we had a great Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we
talked about that last week.
Yeah, and then we decorated for Christmas last Sunday. And it's very festive in this house. Right now we're looking at our very, very, very special nativity scene.
We have, okay, so this is a bougie thing to say, but we have a relationship with a ceramics maker in Faenza, Italy. Shout out to Laura at La Vecchia. And we were there, and we had looked at everything in the store, and she said, do you want to see some of our other items sort of in the back? And so we go into like this back room, and we see this incredible ceramic nativity set that is just beautiful, and I wait every year for Christmas to take it out. And so, yeah, the house is looking festive. We're getting in the Christmas spirit. Is there anything else that you especially like around Christmas time? Around the house?
Around the house? I mean, someday I want to put Christmas lights on the outside of our house. I never did that growing up, and I really want to do that on our house, but I know for a fact it will take so much work, and I need to talk to people who do that every year and tell me how much work it is. But, yeah, I like our tree. Our tree has a lot of ornaments from German Christmas markets. We have like a good 20 of them now.
It is. The tree is pathetic. We got a natural tree 2 years ago, and it was amazing.
It was awful.
Also a pain in the neck. But to have had that, and then to go back to our art of it, and it's not even like a nice, I mean, it's like a skinny, decrepit.
It's 6 feet tall and it's thin. I like it. I think it looks cute.
Well, I'm just saying, I'd like a bigger tree, is all I'm saying. And but we need one that isn't a profound safety hazard to our children. And so, one more Christmas thing to talk about, which is that yesterday we went to the Baltimore Christmas market, Christmas Village. Mm-hmm. And it's like the best thing going. It's the bee's knees.
Yeah.
It is so good. And last year we went, people told us about the Christmas market in Bethlehem. And it's a cool setting. It's like
In Pennsylvania.
In Pennsylvania.
not
Yeah.
the one in in Palestine.
Yeah, I was really disappointed by the Christmas in Bethlehem. So Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and it was like
Fine.
it was huge, but like
It was too Americanized.
it was like the Baltimore Christmas Village, Christmas Market. Really, like if you live in the area, it's worth taking the drive, the train up, down to the west, wherever you are. However you can get to Baltimore for this Christmas market, it's worth it. I'm telling you. You could go to the aquarium, which is just like a little walk down, and just have a full day out of it. But make sure you go to the Christmas Village. You love it, right?
Yeah, I love it. It's small, but it like satisfies the itch that I have for like a Berlin or a Munich Christmas market.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. So we'll probably be back at least 2 or 3 more times before Christmas. And it's nice that it's like a long run. Like it opened like almost 2 weeks ago.
Yes, it opens towards the like middle of November to December 24th.
Incredible. Fantastic. So yeah, we'd love to hear what you like doing around Christmas time, whether you have sort of favorite traditions or little keepsakes that you like taking out. I will say the one thing that we haven't put back that's still out is the mistletoe, because Saoirse loves it so much. Mm-hmm. So we've had mistletoe
hanging
in our house for the last year. But usually we put things away, and then it's exciting to get them back out. Want to thank listeners for. Do you know what? Can we just tell the people about the milestone?
Yeah, we can.
We crossed a significant milestone since we launched this podcast
with That Sounds Fun
with
Network.
That Sounds Fun Network, and that is this week. We passed 100,000 downloads, which is very exciting.
It's so exciting.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for leaving reviews. Thank you for sharing the podcast. We got one review, which was really just lovely over the last couple of weeks, that said that Melissa and I had good chemistry, which is so nice. And also, I would hope so.
The review did say "go figure."
Yeah,
We're married.
We're married.
We've been together a very long time.
Been together a very long time. We invested early.
Yes.
Yeah, so I would hope that we would have good. I'm glad that comes across.
Yeah. So thanks for leaving reviews. We read them and we love them. We cherish them. But with this 100,000 download milestone, we will be doing a giveaway, a contest very soon, just in honor of that milestone, and to thank you all for listening and tuning in and subscribing, and again, rating, reviewing, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So one of the gifts we've tried to offer to listeners is that we don't talk about Donald Trump a lot on this podcast.
And well,
and we're gonna make an exception for that today, and that's because it's been a pretty slow news week. I mean, we saw the Respect for Marriage Act pass in the Senate. I talked about that a bit in last week's episode. I have a lot more to say. I've been involved in this issue for a very long time. I'm a little befuddled by some of the commentary that I see out there, befuddled by some of the people taking the positions they are, given their history on the issue. And if I wasn't working on my book, I'd probably write it all up. But I think the episode last week is probably the closest I'm going to get to being able to offer some of my thoughts, but that happened this last week. We did see, as we suggested that we would over on the Morning Five, we did see Democrats bring in their new leadership in the House. Mm-hmm. And by the way, right, so one of the reasons why the leadership in the Senate is older is because generally there are exceptions. Like Bob Dole is an exception. I think like Bill Frist could have run for president if just history had worked out differently. But basically, the Senate majority and minority leader, those are positions for people who don't envision themselves running for president. Those are jobs for people committed to the Senate as an institution. And in the Senate, I mean, the joke about the U.S. Senate is that everyone in the Senate thinks that they could or should be president. And so that like narrows it down significantly. Like, so it's hard to get your colleagues to support you if they just think that you're going to use the job to sort of put yourself front and center for a position that like most of your colleagues want themselves. And so, you know, I hear all this like comment, you know, Senator McConnell, like, wouldn't it be great if, you know, Republicans had a more exciting majority leader, or, you know, couldn't Democrats have someone with broader appeal than Chuck Schumer? It's like, I mean, maybe that would be beneficial for, I don't know, the Senate, for people's, I don't know, confidence in Congress. Although I tend to doubt, I'm not sure that having sort of the most charismatic, sort of broadly appealing people in charge of the Senate would restore people's confidence. I think it might do the opposite in some ways. But that, I mean, that's a big reason for why Senate leadership is the way it is. The House is a different institution. And there are different reasons why we had older leadership in the House, but that is no more, Melissa. We have Hakeem Jeffries will be minority leader in the House, and you know, probably Speaker one day, and you know, I think we expect, although it's still kind of up in the air, that McCarthy will be Speaker on the Republican side. But so that happened last week. But really, the significant news that's unfolded over the last week, 10 days, or at least something that's been a topic of discussion. We're going to discuss on this episode how significant it is. Is that Donald Trump had this dinner with Nick Fuentes, who's an avowed white nationalist with legitimate ties to anti-Semitic and white supremacist organizations. There's also reporting that other people were involved, sort of in the mix. Milo, the commentator, the disgraced sort of commentator. But this dinner, the first thing I'll say, Melissa, it's so it's. I think it's been newsy because it was part of this narrative of just Ye's sort of decline and sort of everything that's going on in his life and his sort of public activity. And then, I don't want to downplay. It's the former president of the United States entertaining an audience. This is what the Republicans have been saying. This is what the commentary has been saying. How could we have a former president who's entertaining audiences like this? And like my basic approach is like, yeah, let's make sure he's never president again. Also, not a surprise.
Why is this the line? That's the question that I keep on asking over and over again. Why?
Talk a little bit more about that.
Well, because, I mean, we can bring up example after example of President Trump just completely going against norms and going against, like, not just, like, I feel like the norms that, you know, you hear talked about on Twitter, but, like, norms of, like, decorum, norms of, like, this is how a president should, like, conduct himself and should be, an upstanding citizen with, like, a clean record and, like, all that type of stuff. It seems like they're returning to that, like, sort of, like, they're returning to the typical checklist of, like, that is what we want in a president. And dining with an avowed white supremacist is not it and goes completely against that grain. And I'm just kind of like, okay, so we finally have the line on that one. How has he not crossed the line before? And I get it. Like, 2-3 weeks ago when Trump announced for 2024, you brought up, like, you know, it's about power, about how all this stuff they were able to ignore every single red flag known to man, the GOP, because of power, and because the fact that Donald Trump was able to, you know, rise in the primaries, gain the nomination, and seem to be just sort of bulldozing all of the norms and bulldozing all of the expectations, and the power lied with him. So you just sort of bury your head in the sand and you pretend that you don't see or hear anything that goes against your, you know, your usual checklist that you've had for decades. It just... I just don't know how but I get why January 6th wasn't, because they liked there's this idea that if you can sort of keep Trump and any kind of incitement separate, then, you know, he was still sort of in play as the potential, like, 2024 nominee, or, you know, potentially of getting back in, that sort of thing. And so therefore you don't want to sort of muddy that water by making that the line. What do you have?
Yeah, so I have So I think that we have kind of memory hold how Trump ran in 2016. And I think this narrative is supported, and it's one of those things that has become like the popular history of Trump's rise, because it's helpful for Dems, and it was really inconvenient. It would have been inconvenient for Republicans to push back too hard on this sort of popular narrative, which is that, like, Trump rose with the red carpet sort of rolled out for him by Republican elites. And, you know, from, there would be no Trump without Republican support or acquiescence. I mean, I think it's fair to say there'd be no Trump with Republican competence. But I think we do have to remember, especially in those closing months of the Republican primary, how many significant Republican figures were saying really harsh things about Trump in order to try and defeat him in the primary. So you could look at Marco Rubio, you could look at Jeb Bush, you could look at Nikki Haley, you could look at significant Republican sort of pundits. You could look at figures of the religious right who, when Trump announced, said, of course, no, we prefer Ted Cruz, or we prefer Ben Carson. It was only, now there are exceptions, of course. There is this, like, contingent in the House, which obviously grew with the 2016 elections, but there are, like, House figures. There are certainly some people of significant influence in, like, Republican elites that like Trump and thought from the get-go, like, this is the future, and, like, we could use this. But it was helpful for Democrats to say, like, this is the Republican Party is the party of Trump. Everyone in the Republican Party loves Donald Trump. They're tied to him forever. And they love saying that, especially when Trump's approval ratings went down to 30. But I don't think it's up. So I say all of that to say, I think you've seen some commentary that says, Senator Mike Braun of Indiana is expressing discomfort about Trump's meeting with Fuentes, and Joni Ernst in Iowa, that's an early caucus state. The tide's really turning against Trump. And I don't think elite Republicans speaking out against Trump is the death knell to Trump that people want it to be. And I think we only think it's what's needed because we have this narrative, which is not completely true, which is Trump was made possible by Republican elites. Republican elites could have taken him down at any time. No, what happened was Republican elites were unable to take him down and then decided, he's our nominee now. And I think there were some people, there were never Trump folks who made the decision, I guess we just don't have a Republican president. We're not going along with this. And kudos to them. But that's very different from Trump being this Trump being something that was imposed by Republican elites on the country. No, it was much more Trump imposed himself on the Republican Party. And so everyone's looking is Trump weaker this time? I think undoubtedly yes. Is Trump going to be a force in the Republican primary, or is he the front runner? And I think you have to look at the people. You have to look at Republican primary voters for that first and foremost. Yes, the elites have influence. Yes, we should be watching what conservative media does in relation to Trump. That's important for the faith in the news on over at reclaiminghope.substack.com. This week we highlighted David Lane, who's a really influential evangelical activist, sent an email out to his list basically blaming Trump for Republican failures in the midterms. So all that stuff is important. But I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact of Trump won because he had this connection with a certain cultural moment, and specifically with voters, that was not dependent on the traditional sort of Republican gatekeepers. And so this Republicans, with Trump out of office, Republicans certainly feel some freedom to criticize Trump. But I don't think this criticism of Trump on Fuentes is any different from it is really much different in weight from this is interesting. I think the criticism that we're seeing in response to Trump having dinner with Fuentes is actually less heated, less pointed than the response that some Republicans gave to the Access Hollywood tapes just weeks out from the election. And so that's my main point of view here, which is we're seeing Republicans speak out, but Republican leaders, establishment types, tried to speak out during the primary, and they lost, and that's eventually what shut them up.
Yeah, I have two other points to make here, just on Trump as the situation stands. And number one is that I'm suspicious, that's probably the wrong word. It's interesting that along with this highlighting of all these various GOP leaders sort of coming out against Trump or, calling him out for the Nick Fuentes dinner, however you want to put it, and whomever it is that has spoken out, is that it's not being paired with, like, polling of, like, what are primary voters actually thinking right now. And I get it that we're really, really, really early. And so to expect a ton of polling right now is just not it's just not how things go. But I would like for the media narrative to actually pair this with some polling showing that amongst maybe, Trump's typical base that he is actually weakening quite a bit, that sort of thing. And then the second thing that I want to say that this time around as well, which makes me tend to lean towards the fact that Trump's chance at a nomination is not as inevitable as I would have said maybe like 6 months ago.
Yeah, I agree.
And then up to like literally the last time he ran in 2016 is that he lost against Joe Biden already once. In 2016, part of his momentum, part of the reason why so many were able to come over to vote for him, even some Obama voters, is that he was running against a certain person, and her name is Hillary Clinton. And this time around, either it will be President Biden running again, which you and I think is going to happen, or somehow it would be a different Democratic candidate, but it's not Hillary Clinton. Because that particular race was just singular in time. Like, you're talking to like a cultural moment. Like, part of that cultural moment was just sort of how disliked she was by a lot of independents, a lot of people who were able to switch from like an Obama vote to a Trump vote. So I do want to say that. And then with how the midterms went, with like the up until 6 months ago, with how the midterms went, and with the Republicans only taking back the House, that also sort of changes my tune a little bit in terms of like the inevitability of a Trump nomination. Now, again, like, we have all this chatter about Governor DeSantis down in Florida, but like, I need to see some more candidates. I need to see some polling. I need to see some actual campaigning, which again, we're really early for that.
Yeah.
For me to continue to like sort of cultivate some kind of like real, I think, evidentiary based like feeling towards what seems to be going down here.
Yeah, I mean, right, you touch on, Melissa, like, part of what was so disheartening about Trump's rise and presidency is that, it was so about emotion. It was so about culture. It was so about, tapping into a mood and like these kinds of things.
It was vibes before vibes became a buzzword.
Yeah, and I think like as we see, if we do see Trump sort of peter out in this primary, like if we see like, like the old hits aren't playing like they used to, and like the old tricks just aren't working anymore. There's a certain kind of like, it shows how meaningless his victory was in the first place. Like, it just shows and it shows the lack of conviction in really critical ways behind voter support of him.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, I don't want to hear like, yes, voters were responding to like the financial crisis, and they were responding to an anti-elitist sort of sentiment, but those are, it's not so much that Trump was offered any real answers there. Again, it was like mood, it was vibe, it was like, so I don't mean to say like the 2016 election didn't reflect any sort of conviction or any sense of the American people thinking that sort of the country was on a wrong track, etc., etc. But it wasn't like, this is this is the guy who's really gonna like fix everything. No, it's like this is now it's become a trope to say, and I think that's right. Like, no, this is like we want to burn the house down, and it's really like I'll kind of be grateful to see the Republican Party electorate take a different approach in 2024 potentially and ask more serious questions and think more seriously about governance. But like if that happens, then it means that what happened in 2016 isn't like intrinsic to Republican voters. It was like a flyer that they took, which is kind of more depressing.
Yeah, and I guess for me, when I was talking about like why was this the line that was crossed, I think what I'm doing is I'm projecting onto Republican leaders, elites,
Yes,
the various leaders in Congress. I'm projecting onto them what I feel actually towards the voters of 2016 and 2020 in terms of you said the word conviction, especially because I mean the argument you hear again and again and again is that like, oh, I voted for Trump because of policies and sort of disregarded everything else about him, even though I again it's the I held my nose while I made the vote. And again, like you Michael, you've written so much on this. You have so much commentary about how people vote and how you criticize how people vote, and like so I don't want to go down that road with what I've just said there, but yeah. I think what I'm doing is I'm projecting onto Republican leaders sort of like what is the red line for you?
Well, right. And right, like
voters.
Yeah, I mean, in the general, that's the hold your nose thing is fine, but again, he beat out serious candidates in a Republican primary, and so Melissa, like I think that there is like kind of, and with good reason, I think I will be among those who will probably be overly cautious about counting Trump out.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm still seeing in like the media, like Politico is saying like he's the presumptive 2024 nominee. So,
well, yeah, I mean, a poll came out November 23rd, Trump 45, DeSantis 30. You know, so it's, he's still, now again, it's early once you get a race going and people are campaigning and there are debates, then like, but the polls at least show that you ask Republican primary voters, like among, a range of possible candidates, who do you see yourself voting for? And the former president is the one that a plurality view as, the person they would vote to see back in. And so so I'm going to be cautious about counting him out. And I wouldn't be surprised if I was like a beat or two late. But I think that's just based on, his history of, of pulling out victories for himself, or at least sort of staying in when people didn't think that he'd be able to stay in. And at the end of the day, like this is going to be up to Republican primary voters. And I would just like urge folks to be thinking now, really yesterday, if you don't want to be, if you don't want to have to hold your nose and vote for Trump in a general election, then make sure he's not your party's nominee, and do what's needed to make that happen. And I think we are seeing some of the big activists sort of step in, like David Lane, and it'll be interesting to see sort of how all the positioning running up to votes in just just over a year from now, first primary votes in the Republican primary will take place. But Melissa, to like wrap up, one of my primary biases heading into the presidential election is I think our country needs a serious, legitimate debate about the future of the country that isn't obscured by, of course, we'll never have this sort of perfectly, but that is less obscured by personality and these controversies. And like, can we just have some people running for president who are able to articulate a vision for the country and defend it, and critique their opponent's vision for the country in a responsible way so that voters can actually make an informed decision? Like, I know that's asking for a lot, apparently, but look, we know Donald Trump's not going to offer that. I think the Republican Party actually has some folks capable of doing that. And I'd like to see them run for president. And I'd like to see them get the nomination. Because I do think like our country is facing some really important decisions that we're just not in agreement on. And that a honest, informed democratic debate could help bring some clarity and direction to those decisions. That requires, this won't suffice, but it requires candidates who are interested in such a debate. And so, like, that's what I'm rooting for. If we have another election where it's like whatever the Democrats are offering versus a guy who's entertaining white supremacists for Thanksgiving, like that doesn't give voters a real a voice into the direction of the country so much as it is a referendum on Trump, which is really what the last like 3 national elections have been in this country. So yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting you end with that, because what I would end with is that usually I'm extremely not looking forward to the next campaign season. Usually I've just ended the last one. I'm kind of like, can we go UK style and just have 6 weeks before the primary and 6 weeks before the general, and ended at that. But especially on the Republican side, I'm actually eager to see if the Republican Party is able to actually bring not just one candidate, but maybe multiple candidates to fruition who are actually interested in presenting literal policies and ideas and a direction for the country that they believe to be right. I'm actually eager for that to happen, just because we're going to sit in this limbo for a while of just like, what has Trump done now this week, which is what it was kind of, in 2016, what it was in 2020. And
I do feel like the public's ready to move on.
Is the media?
Well, so that's the thing.
That's my
problem. So how much of this is going to be forced on sort of the public of just tracking, every
because I will not lie to you.
Every breakfast this guy has in Mar-A-Lago,
Yeah, because I will not lie to you. I'm of two minds. One is that we need to know that President Trump had Nick Fuentes for Thanksgiving, and to actually dine with an established, known leader of white supremacist ideology. Like, we need to know that. And then the other part of, especially because of, I mean, for all kinds of moral reasons and ethical reasons, but and the other part of me says like, well, Europe style, like there's been, there's far right leaders and they do stuff like this all the time. And yes, they make a little bit of news, but like they're kind of not taken seriously in a lot of ways. Like only their voters take them seriously, but the rest, not in that sort of little subset of voters just say like, we know this exists, we condemn it. And we're going to actually focus over here and not give this oxygen. And so, I struggle with that specifically with media coverage, just because I know how damaging it is for a former president to be doing this, and we should know. But then another part of me says, let's just take the oxygen from the room.
Yeah. And so, like, just to, like, it's an interesting decision for Republicans thinking about running, which is, do you announce early and not leave sort of the stage to Trump?
Yeah.
Or, by announcing early, do you do you not have the stamina to get attention for 2 years, basically? Well,
that's what I'm thinking is that anybody who's thinking or has already formed their PAC, which a few people have, that's what I'm thinking is that they've seen the previous 2 elections from the Trump campaign and just see how much stamina that the campaign can have, and wondering like, will I have that kind of stamina sort of thing? And it's almost like we need kind of like a sacrificial lamb or a few sacrificial lambs. Like Nikki Haley, just jump in. We most likely doesn't have a chance, but please just jump in just to actually start something so that others maybe who are jumping in a little bit later actually don't have to do the full 2 years of just making sure that they stay on top of the media coverage that they will be giving to Trump, unless it is true that both voters and elites, and then therefore the media are convinced that, we are not going to get as many clicks on this, we are not going to make as much money off of this, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Some sacrificial lambs. Where are they?
So interesting. All right. Well, I think that that covers it for this episode. We did want to talk about sort of what this week and really like what the fallout of the midterms, which is all tied up in this, means for Trump, for his candidacy, and I think we covered that. As always, eager to hear thoughts from you, our listeners. It's not completely locked in yet, but I'm hopeful that we'll have guests for next week's episode, and I'm excited about that. Either way, we'll be with you. It'll be the last episode before Melissa's birthday, which we're very excited about. And yeah, until then, obviously we'll be join me for the Morning 5 Monday through Thursday, and then Melissa and I will be back with you next week for Where We Are.
Is that it? Is that the end?
Well, so I was going to say, and this has been Where We Are.
I was waiting for it.
That's too many Where We Are's.
This has been Where We Are. Bye!
It's the end of the weekend, but I still wanna turn up. Yeah, I still wanna turn up. All I want is to go again, but you ain't picking your phone up.